So, welcome back, everyone. And I'm here with Annee again, and she's going to share some of her journey. I'm going to let Annee introduce herself because she has so many strings to her bow and has so much to offer. So, Annee, let's get to know you a bit. Tell us a bit about yourself, where you've come from, what your background is with your healing journey, and all of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Rachel, for your book and for writing the truth of your journey and for inspiring others. So I'm Annie, and I'm 70 years old. So I've been around a while. And in my first iteration, I was a pediatric nurse, looking after children with cancer. That was way back when I was about 19. I then did various nursing jobs and left nursing because I wanted to be there. I wanted to do psychology to look after children and families and support them on their emotional journey because there wasn't really present in the NHS or anywhere. That was invisible. So that's why I left. But I didn't enjoy psychology, so I never became that. But I sort of somehow have always kept that thread with cancer and with death and with palliative care. And so after a few years teaching at universities, I went back and worked in hospices as an educator. And educating doctors and nurses and healthcare assistants, and also working with patients about end of life and about how to be the best possible person and communicator and how to really understand what it's like for people. So the education I did for 12 years in different hospices, and I also educated in nursing homes. It's important. Before I stepped much more onto my spiritual journey, my spiritual path, well, it was along the same time, and as part of that, I became a healer, I became a mentor, a coach, but I also became a death doula and worked as a funeral celebrant as well.
Mm.
And then what happened? I got cancer myself, having just done a course called Health Creation, and I became a health creation mentor. So literally, I was finishing that as I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was
Wow.
yeah. So what a gift I had. And on diagnosis, I remember being almost ecstatic, saying, well, first of all, it was like, why me? Why now? Why not me? And why now? I was so well skilled and so knowledgeable, and I was so grateful that I had all this understanding before I started my own personal journey. And that was really important. So this is my introduction to myself, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I was the same. I was just like, oh, I've got all the tools. I'll be fine. I've got all the tools. This is something that I know in my bones that I can heal. Yeah. That's where Annie and I connected because we were both coming from the same kind of angle of seeing it holistically. Like you say, in hospitals, there isn't, it's all physical. It's just dealing with that little tiny bit of your body that has something that's not quite right and it's not looking at the whole
Mm,
picture. So
mm.
it's so important that I love the fact that you went into all these places doing that education and all different things. So I describe my healing journey as an initiation, and I know you do too.
Yes, it was a real pleasure to meet Rachel that she was seeing it in that way. Because from the word go, from the get-go, I saw it as an initiation. I saw it as an initiation into transformation. And
That's
I knew
yeah,
I had to stop doing certain things that I was doing, like working too hard, not putting myself first, all of those things.
yeah.
And because I'd already been working shamanically, I again had the tools. So throughout the journey in different ways, I did a lot of prayer, a lot of self-healing, a lot of ritual and ceremony. And I can share a couple of those. I won't share it all because it would take probably days and weeks to share it. But one of the things I did, I really became clear that because it was transformation, I wanted to call on butterfly. And butterfly, as we know, it changes shape completely. So I really called on butterfly, and throughout my journey, it was extraordinary how butterflies came to me in the middle of winter when my attic window was closed, when the group was singing for me in my home downstairs. In the winter,
Mm.
butterfly comes in the room.
There you go, their spirit.
And then, on many other occasions, but a little bit after I had stopped my treatment, I did a vision quest. And I walked onto the field, and I'm not joking. Thousands of butterflies came up. They
Wow.
came up from the grasses, and they just surrounded me. You know, if that wasn't affirmation, what was? So that's butterfly. Yeah.
And with those little synchronicities and things coming to you, how did you feel? Because I know for me, whenever I had a synchronicity, it was just everything's okay. You're on the right
Yeah,
path. Yeah.
absolutely. This was like, thank you, thank you, thank you for affirming that. You know, and even now you can see, and I've just moved into a new house. This was 12 years ago I was diagnosed. I've moved into a new house, and when we first moved in, the garden was full of butterflies. And I was like,
Welcoming you.
yay! I was like, yay! You know, they're with me. They're
Yeah.
still with me. You
Yeah.
know, and so it's always life's always an initiation, and it's how we use it. It's how we use it. So I just want to share a couple of other things about initiation that I feel are important. Um, the first thing is that I took my time before I chose any treatment option, apart from getting advice from my teacher, who was a doctor. My teacher, who was a doctor who did the health creation course, Rosie Daniel. Um, and
Of
so
course,
she gave
Rosie
me,
set up the Bristol Cancer Centre, which is now called Penny Bron. So
she did,
yeah,
she
yeah.
did. So, and I did a vision quest. 4 days on a vision quest out on the land, asking what to do. And I want to share this because there were two things that were very important. My teacher said, you've got to take two questions in with you. The first question is, do I want to live? Do I want to live? Because most of us, I realize, don't live properly. We don't live fully. We live a quarter of our lives because we're shrunken. Our culture shrinks us. So how do I want to live? And the second question was, if I want to live, what do I want to live for?
Yeah.
And so me being driven, I thought I'm going to become this, or I'm going to become that, or I'm going to go and heal the world, or I'm going to go and do all of that. And then you know what came to me right at the end of the vision quest? I'm going to live for joy, play, for dance, for fun, for connection, for love. And I think my whole journey, and this is what I want to share, my whole journey was also about learning to fully be in my heart with gratitude and with complete surrender,
Mm,
with complete surrender to the process of whatever was needed.
yeah. And that you're just a living example of the shift that having cancer does to your life, because we are programmed for it all to be about money or saving the world or saving people or whatever it is. And actually, if we just live from that place of joy and love and what's really important to us, family, friends, spending time with loved ones, all of those things just take care of themselves. It's like we don't have to, because with my first diagnosis, I didn't let go of my business, I didn't let go of my work, I went into fear around money and I still need to do it all and get well, and it was such a pressure, and it's like no wonder I got another diagnosis, because it was like you didn't do it right the first time. More surrender, more love, more joy, more beauty. Yeah, more
And
dancing, more
what
fun.
I did, Rachel, for the first time, I stopped working.
Yeah,
I knew, because I'd had lots of times when I'd been burnt out, I knew if I didn't stop, I wouldn't heal.
yeah. And I would say, that's probably true for everybody, isn't it? It's like we
Mm,
need to stop, and that's the self-love.
mm,
It's like,
mm,
stop. You have
mm.
cancer. Stop. Just breathe and look, let's reassess life. Let's
Yeah,
reassess.
your body's trying to tell you something.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all, disease or unwellness, your body's shouting at you. It needs something, listen, listen.
Mm.
So it's interesting that in the opening you brought in nature. Did you feel that what was going on in your body was a reflection of the world and nature? How did that come in with your healing?
It did and it didn't. I think my healing journey was one of learning that I am nature.
Yeah.
I think initially I was still, although I worked with nature, I was still slightly separate. There's so much conditioning, so much conditioning. And so part of my journey was also about being that butterfly, being that tree, sitting with the tree, but also being the tree. Being still, really connecting with nature in a much deeper way than I had previously. Because for the first time, I was still.
Yeah.
I wasn't dashing here and there, and I used to take myself to the sea and just literally watch and be with each wave, just watch and be the sea, you
Mm.
know, and be the river and be the, and also I remember as a winter when I was having a lot of treatment, just wrapping myself up and going and sitting in my garden and just noticing the bulbs coming up, noticing each bulb that came up. It was such a gift. It was
Yeah.
such a gift to be knocked out,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Mm. So do you want to talk
Mhm.
a little bit about what treatment you had? Because, we were talking earlier and saying, for some people who, we choose, oh, I only want to do natural, which is what I decided first time round. It's like, I'm only doing natural. I'm not having surgery. I'm not having the chemo. I'm not having the radiotherapy, to actually accepting on some level that maybe alongside the natural healing, allopathic can be combined in some way. And
Mm.
I
Mm.
certainly looked upon the chemotherapy as golden light, as healing medicine, whereas other people say, oh, you're taking the poison. Or, it's just like, no, I'm not using words like that. How was it for
Mm.
you, Annee?
Mm. Mm. It was an interesting one, because I had been a nurse, so I had the experience of chemo and seeing kids die from chemo. Yeah. And I remember my son asking me when he was much younger, would I ever have chemo? And I said it would depend because he thought I was a bit crazy, even, doing all this alternative stuff. I mean, as a teacher, not as someone that was ill.
Mm,
And and so my initial thought when I was diagnosed was, I'm not going anywhere near medical world. I'm not going anywhere near. And then I kept getting snippets of other aspects of my diagnosis, the grade, the stage, everything else. And I remember going to see a consultant in Bristol and saying, you're going to have to convince me of this. You know, I really don't like what chemo does. I used to teach sociology of health and illness about the power of pharmaceuticals and all of what they are, what the pharmaceutical agenda is. I said, and I'm not going to put myself in there unless there's a really good reason. So I empowered myself from the word go. I really did. I came in. He has to convince me rather than the other way around. You know,
great. Yep.
and he he did. He convinced me because I had limited options. But what I did from the moment I was diagnosed was I started working as initiation and started working with homeopathy. I always had acupuncture anyway. I re-looked at my diet and what I was eating. I was eating quite healthily anyway, but I got even further. I asked for healing. I had anything that I could have, I had actually. But as I went along my cancer journey with the treatment, I saw every treatment, every chemo, my surgery, my radiotherapy, as I saw it as coming in as love and light. And I did lots of visualizations at the time, seeing it actually get rid of the cancer, seeing the cancer go, but always, always doing it with love, but being clear, I was saying goodbye. It was going, I was going to be healing myself with everything I had. So the whole journey was one of intertwining the two. It was really intertwining the two. And then there was one time when I had counseling, but there was one time when I started a very low ebb, because although I'd had all the chemo, and I was having the most toughest, any of you that have had Taxol, it's a really difficult drug, and it comes from the yew tree. So I actually had made a wand out of yew and decided that that wand with the yew was going to be holding me as I was having the chemo. But even then, my tumor seemed to not be shrinking. And I went through a time of real fear, absolute fear. Because by that time, I'd lost my power a bit because I was quite exhausted.
Mm.
And I remember going to the consultant saying, what do I do? I'm scared. I'm really scared. We've tried it. We've hit it with everything. And it still doesn't seem to be shrinking. Because the academic and the nurse in me had read a lot of the research papers, and I knew that if it didn't shrink, I was more likely to die.
Mm.
Um,
So what was the fear about death?
the fear was about death, but it was like, I don't believe this. I have done everything to heal. I've thrown everything at it, and still it's not doing as I want it to. And what I discovered, oh no, so there's two things there. First of all, I realized I thought I'd been loving myself, but I hadn't fully.
Mm.
I hadn't fully, really started loving myself. And I remember creating this song, and I don't think I'm going to sing it here, but well, maybe I won't. It's I am my own lover, I am my own sister, I am my own daughter, I am my own friend. And I used to just sing it to myself all the time.
Mm.
And slowly, 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 all the parts of me that had been wounded came back into balance. And it was such a beautiful process. So I did that because I had to be put into that fear. And I'll come back to the death question. I had to be put into that fear before I took hold of my life.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't been afraid until then. And that felt really important. And yes, it was about death. It went back to me thinking again, why hadn't I been fully living? And what did I want to live for? And I had done all this work with death, but actually, I don't think there's ever a time that a human being isn't afraid to some extent of dying. And that's the caterpillar. How's it for the caterpillar when they're going into the butterfly? And I think it's really important to know that and not imagine that we can just sail through death. It's a big transition, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to live to see my grandchildren. All those sorts of things. And I did masses of work around mortality and befriending death. But you still, if you haven't got that fear, you're not human. So I just want to voice that. So my consultant told me, I want to come back to that. She
Yeah.
told me, well, we're just starting a trial and you'd be perfect for it. And I haven't had any patients yet. It's literally coming out in a couple of weeks. Do you want to do it? And you know what? I went away and I thought, me on a controlled trial? No way. No way. And then it was like, oh shit, I've got to surrender again.
Yeah.
And she had introduced it to me as this drug was so toxic, they've had it on the shelf for 20 years
God.
and not used it. Yeah, great. And she said, but it's a targeted chemo. It has to go with a Herceptin, it's targeted. And so it won't be too bad. It's sort of like, and actually, I had that every month or every 3 weeks, I think. And that was hard. But
Mm.
do you know why I needed to do it? Because I still hadn't fully stopped.
Uh,
And I knew that I would get busy again, as I have, unfortunately. But I knew that, so I knew that I had to have something to keep me down again and to give me that longer period of healing.
yeah. And it's interesting as you were saying that and kind of going, no, I'm not going to take that. It's almost that little story of the man who's drowning and he's praying to be saved. And like, but you didn't grab onto the helicopter, or I sent a boat for you because he's expecting this giant hand to come and scoop him out of the sea or something. It's like, actually,
Mm, mm,
this is what's going to help you. And it may not be the help that you think it is. So like with me, everyone was so shocked that I decided to do the chemotherapy, but I just knew deep inside, like you, it was going to stop me. It was going to give me more time to meditate, pray, self-love. It's like,
exactly.
yeah, which,
Mm.
sometimes you just need the rug pulled out from under your feet to really, really get on your knees and really surrender.
Really get on your knees, fully get on your knees.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing with that is that, in terms of treatment, is that we get so inundated with people's opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
you should be doing that. You should be doing the other. And I had to not listen to any of that. And I had to listen to what felt right for me. And it's going to be different for everybody, what feels right. And so with this idea of this controlled trial, it was like, oh my God, me having been alternative, being on a controlled trial, I'm a bit ashamed of that. I'm a bit ashamed that I haven't managed to heal myself
Mm.
fully, you know, even with the chemo. And yet I knew also, because it's controlled, that I might not, even if I agreed to go on it, I might not get the medication.
Yeah, you might be the placebo.
And I knew I would be chosen to get the drug. I just knew, I had a knowing, and I was. I was the second one on the trial across the whole of the world to get that drug.
Wow.
And I knew I needed it, so really, really listen. I'd say you have to really try and be still and listen to what's right for you.
Mm.
And it wasn't that I didn't do everything else. And like Rachel, I saw everything coming in as love. I saw it coming in. This targeted chemo was coming in to finish off the job. You know,
Yeah.
and because I'd had a very high number of cancer cells in my blood. You know, and the taxon and everything just didn't fully work. So I was very grateful to it.
Mm.
And just to finish off with this, I got asked by my consultant to do a talk on the experience of being on your research trial. And I said to her, I said, well, this is going to be quite controversial. And I was doing it to doctors and nurses, and it was controversial. And I said, how can you possibly even think that this one drug is the thing that's going to have made me well?
Yeah.
How can you? I said, what about all this other stuff I'm doing? You know, everything else I've done,
Yeah.
especially the self-love.
Yeah.
That's what's made me well.
Yeah.
And this drug has helped me, but it's not now this drug that's going to be marketed as the cancer killer. You know,
I
I just
think
want to
that's
say
it,
that.
isn't it? That's the thing that's important is it's everything, I mean, that's, one of the things people say to me, well, what healed you? And I went, well, I did so many things. I healed me and my journey healed me. And, living in joy healed me. But you can't say, oh, yes, it was, because otherwise everyone would live who had that. It's like, there's no one size fits all package. So yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, when people say, well, what
Mm,
did they just want to copy what you did because you're here
mm,
and you're a
mm,
shining example
mm,
of
mm.
life. And it's like, got to find your own way.
And the way, as we said earlier, the way the medical system works is it isolates where the tumor and it forgets about the whole body.
Yeah.
It forgets about the soul,
Yeah.
and it forgets about relationship and life. It
Mm,
forgets about stress. It forgets about diet. All of those things.
yeah.
So as well, and of course, the power of initiation is even stronger because you're
Absolutely.
really, really stepping into your self-power along with your allies, along with nature. You're
Mm.
being held by all the invisible as well as the visible. And what do we do as women? We often don't accept people's help,
And
so
we
we have to
struggle.
really ask for help.
Yeah. We
You
struggle
know,
on
really,
and we're the ones that give the help, aren't we? So that's
yeah.
one of the big lessons is can you ask for help? As hard as
Mm.
it is, can you ask for help? Yeah.
And receive the love
Mhm.
because it's when it comes down to it, it's all about love.
Absolutely. So
Mm.
you touched on your spiritual journey a lot. How would you relate, as we've talked before, we find it really fascinating that women get cancer in these, divine feminine parts of our body, our breasts, our womb, our ovaries, our cervix. How does that speak to you about the divine feminine or the wounds of the divine feminine?
When you asked that question, I actually could feel tears rising.
I've
You
got
know,
goosebumps. Yeah.
yeah, because something that's not talked about, something that Rachel and I have talked a lot about, and I know that the cancer that I had was part of my wounded feminine. It was totally my wounded feminine. From a little girl, my experience of living in this world that is so hard for little girls, and still is.
Mm,
And in my family, it was too, and that's what made me stronger. That's what made me the person I am today because of that wounding. Because actually, I was being called by the divine feminine to say, "Wake up! Come on, wake up! Start valuing yourself. What are you doing, you little woman? Why aren't you in your power? Why aren't you singing? Why aren't you vibrant? Why are you only half living?" So this cancer, which was in my breast, was my gift from the divine feminine to me. Yeah.
mm. That's so beautiful, Annie. So
Mm.
beautiful. So yeah. So would you say, because my last question was going to be what are the gifts of cancer? I know people don't like to hear that. It's like, what? Cancer's a gift? But we've both had such huge life-changing initiations from having cancer, and we're both loving life. There's the gift. Change your mind. Love life. Don't see it as
Love
hard.
life and yeah. Love life and let go of all the things we think we need.
Yes.
I want to say this because we're so tied to this world of consumption and believing in things and stories. But actually, all we need is love. I mean, it sounds crazy, isn't it? All we need is love. But I'm now currently living in a community. We set up a community with lots of children because I really want the next generation to grow up differently. And I'm living in a caravan, and it doesn't matter. I sold my 4-bedroom house. It doesn't matter. It helps you to see things differently. I want to come back to the gift because I want to come back to death, actually. Because I think part of my gift was I said I got fearful, but now I know that we have to live with death every day. We have to live with the fact that we might die, and that's the letting go, and that's being in the flow. Not thinking we have to plan for everything, not thinking we have to control for everything. Because the more I let go, the more I see the power and the beauty and the magic of the universe that gives to me freely and lovingly. So that for me is the biggest gift. But I want to come back to the death thing because often, and I work with death and I have done for years. I always say because I mentor people and I support people when they're dying, or not even when they're dying, when they're going through their cancer journey. And one of the things I say is that we're healing into living and
Mm,
we're healing into dying. And for me, that is such a gift that if we can begin with our cancer journey to fully befriend the fact we're going to die, then all these other things that we think are important, they float away. And
Yeah.
what becomes important is relationship, connection, and speaking our truth with compassion and authenticity and
Mm.
joy, and,
Yes.
and being anchored to the ground and not allowing the world, the things that are happening in the world to throw you too much or throw me too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the gift. It's given me power, the power to live well. And when I say live well, not for myself necessarily, but to be in service as an elder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's powerful, Annie. Thank you so much. Very
thank
powerful.
you. Thank you.
So beautiful to hear your story. So, if people want to get in touch with you, can we find you somewhere? You could leave me some info that I can pass on.
Yes, the interesting thing is I was just building up my business as you do, and I'd got a Facebook page and I was going to have a website. And then when I had cancer, it was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that anymore. So I work invisibly. I
I think that's the divine feminine way.
It probably is. It probably is. So I don't. It's just word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's word of mouth, and I work with donation.
Okay.
So I
And
work.
also, Annie and I are going to be doing a Zoom together on the 4th of April. So you can connect with us both there. And if you want to chat more with Annie on a more personal level, that's your opportunity to kind of get her details. We're not going to put things on the
No,
internet for anyone to
no.
come.
But my email. I mean, they can always contact you, and you can give them my
Yes.
email.
Yeah. And also, I
Yeah.
mean, Annie and I are both part of the Cancer You Can group on Facebook, which is a support group for people with cancer. So I'll put the link to that because people can join that, and Annie's in there, so you can connect to her there as well. So it's a good place
Yes.
to start.
If you ever want to leave me a message on it as well, I'll see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Thank you, Annie, for all your
Mm.
wisdom and your journey. And we will be back with Annie for the closing ceremony at the end of the day. Thank you so much.